Hey folks, Gary here with Paramount, your source for guns, gear, training, tactics, all brought to you by Real World Experience. So in today's video is really about talking about the dry fire mag. I want to talk about what a great product this is, and if that's all you wanted to know, whether I thought this was great, it is. So you can stop right now, you can jump to the end of the video, go down to the description, and there's a link there where you can purchase this with a discount. And the reason it's such a great product because it solves some major problems that people have when it comes to training. Not only does it save you money because you're not expending ammo, but it helps you train correctly. And I'm also going to talk about how this is such a great complement to the Mantis products. Between these two, you have almost a perfect dry fire and training solution. And I'll tell you, without that, I'm telling you right now, folks, most people don't realize that dry firing causes more problems than it solves. Dry firing on your own really does reinforce some of the worst or most detrimental bad habits that shooters have. So really, when you're dry firing without feedback, which is really what these things allow you to do, you're actually getting really good at doing everything wrong. So let's talk about that. When it comes to dry firing, why is that such a problem? And the problem is number one, especially with newer shooters, all you're doing is basing whether or not you're getting good repetitions in based on what you see and what you feel. And I'm telling you right now, if you haven't been shooting enough to know what right feels like and what right looks like, you're just getting it wrong. You're not getting any feedback. So you're not getting feedback from the gun. You're not getting an analysis or diagnostic information. And that's what the Mantis does really well. The Mantis gives you that diagnostic information, and it tells you every single trigger squeeze, whether or not you're doing it right. And the Mantis works whether you're dry firing or live firing. Now, the problem with the Mantis is also the problem with most dry firing is that you don't get to have follow through. Now let's define what follow through is. Follow through is probably the most critical fundamental, because when it comes to shooting fundamentals, you got body position, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, breath control, trigger squeeze, and follow through. Now, traditional dry firing only allows you to focus on the trigger squeeze. And I can tell you right now, after training thousands of people on the range, if I yell at them and I have them focus on nothing but trigger squeeze, their trigger squeeze gets worse and worse and worse. But if I have them focus on follow through. Now, follow through, again, the most important fundamental, because that's what fixes your trigger squeeze. And it also helps you be a better shooter to where you can shoot fast and accurate, but also it helps you reinforce the habits that you need to build to be a good defensive shooter so that you can win a firefight. So when we're talking about follow through, what I'm talking about is when you break that shot, all right, you squeeze the trigger to the rear. Follow through is maintaining contact and pressure on that trigger, only allowing the trigger to go forward enough to reset, not beyond, while simultaneously reacquiring your front sight on the target. That's what good follow through is. So we're holding that trigger to the rear and we're allowing that trigger only to go forward enough to reset. And traditional dry firing doesn't allow you to do that. Before I start demonstrating with a weapon, and especially if you're at home and you want to practice anything that we're talking about, make sure you follow the proper firearm safety rules. But we're also going to make sure I clear these weapons, and you need to clear that weapon at home as well. The proper way to clear a weapon is to always keep that gun pointed in a safe direction, drop your source of feed, whatever that is. In this case, it's a magazine. And I've already cleared this. This is the dry fire mag. We're going to lock the slide back to the rear, and then we're going to do a 3-point check. We're checking to make sure there's nothing in the magazine well, there's nothing at the rear of the slide, and there's nothing in the chamber itself. So now we have a clear weapon and I can demonstrate what we're talking about. And when we're talking about good follow through, what we're talking about is when we are squeezing the trigger, we're holding that trigger to the rear. Obviously, if there was rounds in the gun would go off, it would cycle. All right, I'm holding that trigger to the rear. I'm maintaining contact and pressure on the trigger, and I'm only allowing that trigger to go forward enough to reset. At the same time, simultaneously, I'm reacquiring that front sight onto the target. Normally, especially with a striker fired gun, I can't do that, right? The trigger isn't going to reset because I have to cycle the gun. And most people, all they're doing is they're practicing that trigger squeeze, they let go, they cycle the gun, and they do another trigger squeeze. You're coming off the trigger every time, and this is what is causing you to slap the trigger. It's important to maintain contact with the trigger because that gives you better economy of motion and economy of time. Because if I'm trying to shoot fast and accurate, or even one or the other, right? I need to limit the amount of movement that I have on there. So if I'm only going to the point of reset, that is a much smaller movement than coming off the trigger, back on the trigger, off the trigger, back on the trigger. All right, and every time that you go off the trigger and back on the trigger, you're also creating movement left or right with the firearm itself. So now you're being less accurate, you're throwing rounds all over the place, and this is a much longer trigger cycle. so your split times are going to be much longer. So you end up shooting slower and less accurate. So that is the problem with dry firing without these two products. Now, what the dry fire mag allows you to do, or what it does, is it simulates a trigger reset in a striker fired pistol. And these are available for almost all striker fired pistols. All right, so here is a stock Glock 19. I'm gonna go ahead and do another 3-point check to make sure it's clear. All right, we're gonna let that go forward. All right, we're gonna insert the mag. Now the first trigger squeeze I do with this, we're actually gonna be releasing the actual internal striker. So it's gonna be a little bit harder. Once I squeeze that trigger the first time, I've released the striker. That striker is now forward, and now the only sound that you're gonna hear, and if you were holding this, the only resistance that you would have would be from the actual dry fire mag itself. So as you can see now, with that dry fire mag in there, it allows me to pull that to the rear, maintain contact and pressure just to the point of reset. It resets. Normally I would also be simultaneously reacquiring that front sight. While that recoil process is taking place, I'm resetting that trigger and also reacquiring that front sight onto the target. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's what this allows you to do. It actually allows you to practice your trigger squeeze as well as your reset. And that is, folks, that is so critically important if you want to get better at shooting. You really have to practice that. And re-racking the slide every single time is going to do nothing but slow you down. You're going to get less repetitions. Your training is going to be less effective. And there again, you're getting better at something that's not part of the natural process of firing. And it's just reinforcing a bad habit. You're getting really good at doing things wrong. So don't do that. And that's what this does for you. And as I'm practicing dry firing, it allows me to reset that trigger every single time. I'm resetting the trigger, firing, resetting the trigger. I'm actually practicing follow through. I'm not practicing just the trigger squeeze, because if you're just focusing on the trigger squeeze, your trigger squeeze often gets worse. Now, the only other problem that's left with this is I don't know if my trigger squeeze is all that good. And that's what's really great about combining this with the Mantis, is that the Mantis is going to give you that analytical and diagnostic feedback so that you know every single trigger squeeze, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And I'm going to show you how that works with that. And while this video isn't about the Mantis necessarily, I need to do a whole nother video on that, but it is just so, there's so much this thing does, especially the Mantis X. The Mantis X, you can do that with dry fire or live fire. And that's another thing that's great about this. You can build these skills using dry fire, but you need to make sure that you confirm those skills through live fire, because there's a little bit of a gap there. There's no doubt about that. And that's what the Mantis does. It helps you to analyze what's going on. It gives you diagnostic information. It captures that information so you can also see if you're progressing. And that's really important as well. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and throw this Mantis on there. And this Mantis is very easy to install. This device is a lot like a lot of the flashlights out there. Just gonna put it on the rail. And this Mantis can be used on pistols, rifles, shotguns. I believe they even have a bow attachment, so you can actually use this with archery as well. So it's just a great device. All right, so once you have the Mantis attached to the pistol, all you need to do is turn it on. You'll see the green light blinking, and then just lay it on the table so that it calibrates as it's pairing up with the app. All right, and then we're gonna go ahead and open up our Mantis app. Now, what we want to do, if you look here at the top, you can see that it is set on pistol. We're going to make sure that it's set on pistol. There are other firearms that you can specifically choose. We are using a Glock. We're using the Glock 19. All right, it's right there, so we can go ahead and set that up. Now, we are right-handed, so I'm going to make sure that's clicked. Now, right here in the middle where it says shot detection mode, you see where it says dry fire. If it's set on that, it will not work. We're going to be using a dry fire mag. Second to the bottom option, we see CERT DFM. That stands for dry fire mag. We're going to check that. The mount location, mount direction is forward, and the mount location is bottom. So we are good to go there. All right, now we're going to go to train. You can go to open train. There's lots of different options on there. We go ahead and hit start. And again, while you're doing this, make sure that it's not just squeezing the trigger. You're not practicing just that. We're going to practice everything. So we're going to work on body position. Make sure your feet and stance are correct. If you know what that is, make sure you go get some training. So we got body position, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, breath control, trigger squeeze, and follow through. So as I'm lining up my sights, I am practicing all of that. So I'm getting the most out of this training.
95, 98, 94, 92, 95, 96, 97.
All right, so then we hit stop and it'll give us an average score. So that average score shows us what's going on there, right? And right there we got a 95.7. But if I haven't been shooting for a while and I don't know what's going on there, right? So I can line up the sights. I feel like I'm doing good.
80.
And I'm not. I'm just squeezing the trigger.
94.
And all I'm doing is
96. 89. 87.
is slapping this
78.
trigger. I'm doing all these things wrong.
90.
And I can go and tell
77.
everybody, hey, I've been dry firing. But really all I'm doing is getting worse and worse at the fundamentals. You're just practicing and getting bad, right? I also want to just show you real quick that this shows you everything that was going on with each and every shot. You can see here on the second shot, the blue is where you're starting to make contact with the trigger. All right, you're lining your sights up. And then the yellow is where you start to engage the trigger. And then the red that you see there is where the shot actually went off. So you can see all of that movement taking place. And really what I want you to pay the most attention to is that yellow, because that yellow shows you the trigger movement that's taking place or the muzzle movement while you're engaging the trigger. But this gives you the diagnostic information that you need and the positive reinforcement that you need to build good shooting fundamentals. And I hope that makes sense. And folks, I'm telling you right now, if you're just dry firing without these two aids, you're not doing that. Now, how would I have to dry fire even with the Mantis without the dry fire mag is that I have to rack the slide, squeeze the trigger, rack the slide, reset, squeeze the trigger, rack the slide, reset. So there again, you're breaking that up. Even if you remember to actually have good follow through and maintain contact with the trigger and allow it to go to the point of reset. It's just completely unnatural and you're not going to get better that way. And it's much slower, so it's going to take more time. So both of these systems together are all about saving you time and money and getting the most out of training. And while it is not a insignificant investment, these magazines are about $100, and then your Mantis X is about $250. The X2 is a little bit less. The Mantis X2 you can't use with live fire. You can only use with dry fire. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big promoter of the X10. One case of ammo, which that will more than save you if you're serious about training. Both of these systems can easily pay for themselves within a few training sessions. And it allows you to incorporate daily or weekly training, a regular training regimen where you can continue to maintain and improve your skills. That's what it's really about. All right, so now let's talk about the mechanics of this device and how it does what it does. So this, you'll notice when I first got the one for the M&P, all right, just like right now, it doesn't work. It's not doing anything. And I'm going to show you exactly what's taking place here so that you understand how this works mechanically so that when you need to tune this device, it's easy for you to do because you understand the mechanics of it. As I insert this mag in here, I want you to look. You can see the trigger bar. It's bumping up against this piece right here. And if this piece goes back far enough, and that's where that trigger breaks and resets, breaks and resets. So right now what's taking place is that because I have a non-stock trigger, this is an Apex trigger in this, which I also highly recommend. Flat Apex triggers are the way to go. But because it is a non-stock trigger and the way this engages on the trigger bar, it doesn't go back far enough, right? So what I want to try to do is I want to try to imitate my actual trigger squeeze. So right now it requires too much travel before that trigger breaks and before it resets. So what we're going to do, this comes with the Allen wrench, but I'm using the fix-it sticks. We're going to put that in there, and I'm going to give it a half a turn. So I'm going to put that in there half a turn. See if we get where nope, still not there. Another half a turn. Turning it to the right, tightening it is pushing that forward, so it's pushing the click point. That's how I think about it. So that way there's less travel required before it hits that breaking point and before it hits the reset. All right, so I gave it another half a turn, and we got our trigger break and trigger reset. Trigger break and trigger reset. Now, what I want to do is I want this to mimic my current trigger. I want it to break in about the same spot. All right. So again, I've cleared it, and I'm checking to see if it breaks in about the same spot. That is almost exactly where my current trigger breaks and resets. So there again, you can tune this and get it as close to your trigger as well. Now with the standard kit, you get two springs, one that's already installed, which is a heavier one, and then one that's in the box, it's a lighter one. I'm gonna keep the heavier one in there because that's what I wanna practice with personally. It's probably a pound heavier or so, or a few ounces heavier than my current trigger, but that's okay. That's what I want to practice with. Now you can buy the kit that comes with a spring kit. It comes with multiple springs, and you can actually get it almost exactly like your current setup, even if you have aftermarket springs or aftermarket trigger kit in there. And being able to practice that follow through, it is critical to build good shooting habits and to build those fundamentals in a natural way. Anytime that you're having to break up that process, rack the slide, inserting these artificial movements and things like that into the natural shooting process, all you're doing is building bad habits. You really are. So it can be counterproductive. Folks, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative. I'm sure I left some stuff out. So if you have any questions, make sure you leave those down in the comments down below. I'll be sure to answer those. Also, whether you have any questions or not, go ahead and leave a comment down below. That really helps us out. Please like, please subscribe, hit that bell icon. And while gear is always great, and there are links for all this stuff down below, what we're really about is training. So make sure you go to ParamountTactical.com, go to our training schedule. We'd love to have you out. We'd love to meet you in person. We'd love to train with you. Make sure you go check out our other social media platforms, which links for that are down below as well. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready, and we'll talk to you soon.